Hey, thank you for coming to my show. I think you'll hear something today that makes you click that like button, share with your people, and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Let's stay connected. Tell me what you think in the comments. Thank you for joining us here at Our Unseen Dads. My name is Lionel Gentle. I'm your host, and today my guest is Rob Glover. How you doing today, Mr. Glover?
Doing fantastic, brother. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. So, how I like to start my show is my first question is, who are you?
It's a great question. I really wasn't prepared for that. Um, I am a young man, a brother, originally from Chicago. I've traveled a lot. I've seen a lot. I'm a father of four. I'm married. I currently work in corporate America for the past 25 years. And I live right outside of Washington, D.C.
Okay. And what does fatherhood mean to you as a black man?
I think fatherhood means um, leading more than anything, leading your family. It means protecting, providing a roof. It means being available and understanding that God has provided you with the opportunity to prepare other people for our society and for finding a way to contribute to the last name on the back of your jersey.
Who's your dad?
So my dad was Count Bruce Glover. He was a Marine and father of two. He was an only son. Um, and unfortunately, we lost him at 6 years old of my age. So I don't have a lot of fond memories, but I have a few. I knew that he was a man of humor, a man of integrity. Um, and when I say that, I meant that, one of the stories that my mother often told me that frustrated her was that he often brought home homeless people to give them a meal. And so that was one of the few facts that I knew about him as a man that I try to carry that legacy on. And that is never underestimate someone who has less than you, but always try to uplift everyone when you have an opportunity to.
Well said. Yeah. What are some of the biggest challenges you've faced as a black dad?
I think I'll have to reflect on that as my kids grow older. Um, but just to give some perspective, right? I have four children. My oldest just turned 16, last week. My second just turned 13 a month ago. And then I have fraternal twins, a boy and a girl, who turned 10 in September of this year. So, three girls and a boy. We've lived in Atlanta, Seattle, and now Fairfax, Virginia. I would say, one of the biggest challenges we had is trying to determine what type of education system our children are going to be in. Um, Obviously, society would tell you private school education, right, will prepare you for the most success in corporate America, maybe, or maybe with connections, right? If you come from an urban environment or city like us, right, you know that street cred is a real thing and your ability to maneuver, you know, out and about, is as important as your ability to maneuver in a boardroom. So for us, it was trying to determine how do we get the best of both worlds, right? And that was a very huge financial decision for us because we had to scrape up enough dollars to buy a home in an affluent neighborhood, right? So that we could get our children in some of the best schools in a public school environment, right? I would say that was probably the biggest decision I had to make as a dad. And then the second thing is trying to navigate school, right? Kids want to be popular. Keeping up with the Joneses is a real thing. And so now that we've broke our neck to be in these good neighborhoods, it is equally enough pressure trying to keep up with the Joneses, right? Where's everybody going for vacations? Oh, well, I don't know if we can do all that. We ain't going to Spain for a family of 6. We're not flying to Acapulco and Mexico 3 times a year, or whatever, right? Or even if it's just Outer Banks, right? You have to get, whatever. So I think there's a challenge there as a dad of trying to give your kids the best you can give them, set them up for success across all, frontiers. At the same time, still being able to manage yourself, financially, and preparing yourself for the long vision, which is obviously university, college, or whatever happens, retirement or whatever.
Yeah. That's very true. I like when you said, street cred, because I would imagine being in the business corporate world, having a little street knowledge goes a long way for you in the corporate world where you work.
You want to answer to that? Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
man. It's critical. And matter of fact, so much so that now that I'm seasoned, right? I'm very transparent with sharing that, right? And I'll give you a couple of quick examples. Coming from Chicago, I love to enlighten people that, Chicago wasn't always about shooting people. It was about manning up, right? You walking down the block and it's like, hey man, you got my change? Oh, you got my shoes? Oh, you got my hat? And you're like, man, okay, if I cross the street, they gonna really mess with me, right? So now I just got to deal with it. That same type of awareness happens in the office, right? Comments come up and you're thinking like, that was kind of offhand comment, right? Oh, okay, he made this nice gesture, but it's kind of backhanded. Like, okay, why don't they like me, or this, that, and the other, right? And so just your ability to process what someone said and what it may mean for you is extremely important, right? Being able to be quick-witted and have something to say back to somebody to not let them step on you, right? Shows a matter of, your willingness to deal with confrontation, right? If you've never been in an environment where you've had to deal with confrontation, you may not be willing to deal with that confrontation at work. But now let's go back to the school piece. Do you have the vocabulary to manage confrontation? Do you have the awareness of what's going on around you to deal with confrontation? Can your rebuttal, your response, put them in their place without you having to call them a bad word, right? So, it's things like that where, having a little bit of awareness on how to deal with people and in your environment will help you. And believe it or not, that is seen, right? My example of, I was a corporate auditor, New York. I was not a CPA. I was on a team where the 2 other candidates were CPA candidates. My boss gave me the promotion. So I went back into his office and said, hey, Mike, why'd you give me the job? He said, man, Rob, you ain't scared to talk to nobody. He's like, you don't care if it's the finance director, the CFO, you'll walk in there and you'll talk to them like a man, right? And I said, but I'm not a CPA. He said, it's all right. You got 2 other CPAs that work for you. A light bulb went off for me. And I said, you know what? That's why I'm successful, because I see that guy as just another man. I don't see him as, oh my gosh, I'm not intimidated by that. And that's what that street cred will do for you, right? You're not intimidated by the environment. You're not intimidated by how big the stage is, right? You just go do you, right? And you'll succeed.
What strategies do you use to instill confidence and pride in your children?
Hard love. There's a saying that babies respond off of our interactions with them. So when they fall down, they don't cry initially. When we go, "Oh, boy, are you okay? Oh, then they're like, "Oh, ah!" Right? So, I use that same leverage with my children, right? They come home and they say, "Oh, this didn't happen." I'm like, "So, what you gonna do about it?" It's tough. It's right. The world is tough. Not fair. You're right. The world ain't fair. What you gonna do about it? Right? So I'm often playing devil's advocate, or I'm often really pushing them to their limit, on what they're upset about. I was studying to be, it's called a lean black belt Sigma. If anyone's familiar with, continuous improvement, it's a corporate, title. And one of the strategies they have to get to the root cause of an issue is called the 5 whys, right? You ask why 5 times in a row to really get down to the root cause of why something has happened, where the defect is, or why something broke, or where the risk is in a process. And I use that with my kids, right? They're like, "Oh, this didn't happen." I'm like, "Why?" Okay, well, why'd that happen, right? So how does that make you feel? Why does that matter? What's important, right? And ultimately, either they're angry with me, and I'm just like, "Well, when you figure out that other thing, come back to me and I'll help you," right? Or we really get down to really what's bothering them. And then now I know where to parent, right? And I think the other thing that's really important is I'm learning this as a dad in the 2020s, right? These kids are soft, man. These kids are soft now, right? And as much as I joke about that, it's our cross to bear. So a lot of times I'm just very mindful that I have an environment where my kids are talking to me. And so I'm just very cautious to not ruin that, right? I'm very cautious to not push them enough where that they feel like, my parents are too strict, or I can't do this, I can't get anything out of it. So when I'm parenting and when I'm pushing those limits, I am being very mindful of, okay, I pushed too hard. Okay, let me pull back, give them their space or do whatever.
And I'm sure your ability to push depends on your child, on the child that you're talking to, because I'm sure you can see that your oldest child you have to deal with differently than you deal with your middle child and you deal with your youngest child. You can push your youngest child maybe harder than you can push your middle child and you can push your oldest child. You know what I mean?
And I'm surprised by that because what I'm often preaching is that I'm preaching more leadership. I'm always talking about leadership, right? They probably sick and tired of that, but I'm always preaching leadership, but I preach differently to my oldest because I'm reminding her that the other ones are watching her, right? And I'm preaching to my youngest because I'm saying, hey, right, this is what you need to be doing. And I'm pointing to their older siblings, right? And I'm saying, hey, you see how they do this thing? That's because we gave them that authority to do these things, right? You can do these things once you get there. But then I'm telling these older ones, I'm like, hey, man, like, I need you to be a leader for your younger siblings, right? And so, yeah, I'm pushing differently. And sometimes I find that because the younger ones are listening, they actually respond better than the older ones, right? Because I'm not talking to them directly. They hear what I'm saying to the older ones, and they're trying to respond and be like them now. So, where you push and pull does matter.
Yeah. You said something just now that I find interesting, and it happens a lot, not just with the children, but with us. So your oldest is a girl, so she's your daughter. So she's watching you deal with her mother on a day in, day out basis, and she is watching intently. She's not asking questions, she's watching. And you are aware of those things. How do you manage teaching her what her spouse is supposed to be like and dealing with her mother when you guys may have some issues? Because we know we have ups and downs in marriages, right? And how does that work for
This thing's recorded. All
you?
right, I'm just kidding. So honestly, it's a great question. And the bottom line is this, right? I'm going to address it with two pieces because there's two pieces that I hear in there to unpack.
Mhm.
And one is, how am I teaching her what to expect for in a spouse, right? Leading by example. We all know that the number one person that she's going to mimic her future husband over, right, is her current dad, right? I may have heard that a lot throughout life. I never really understood it, never really accepted that. But what I do is I'm aware of it, right? Two, I try to marry the values that were instilled in me to the values I think that are going to be critical and important for the next generation. A perfect example of that is just how we look at the LGBT community, right? When we were growing up, man, we used all kind of words, right, to address a guy who wasn't manning up. That vocabulary is unacceptable now, right? That vocabulary insinuates something else now. That vocabulary insinuates that you're not manning up, right, in today's environment. Despite how you feel religiously, about these topics, right, it's a reality that's here. And so, I often am trying to gauge a non-chauvinistic, personality while still, presenting strength. So an example of that is, making sure that, I'm presenting a very positive image that's not glorifying drug dealing or anything like that, but it's still saying like, hey, make decisions, be firm, know these things, and in some back and forth arguments, we've had this discussion on, is that homophobic, or is this misogynistic, or is this whatever, right? And as a result of that, I had a conversation with my daughter, and she said, hey, her words, not mine, right? I don't want to be with a guy that's soft, Dad. I don't want to be with a guy they call it a sassy man, right? I want a guy who takes a position, who feels this way about these topics. And so I feel like it's starting to take root, but those are her words coming back to me, right? As far as dealing with her mother, yeah, we've had arguments, we've gotten loud, but because I was raised in an environment that was very strong on words, right? My mother was extremely poignant on, be careful with the words that come out your mouth. Not only do you not know how other people take them, but you don't want to manifest things into that energy. You want to manifest that negative energy. So an example of that is, right, we hate the sin, we don't hate the person, right? You did something that was stupid. You're not stupid, right? You did something that was dumb. You're not dumb, right? Those are very important things to me. And so I'm very mindful that when I am having those conversations with her mom, and we are having disagreements, right? I'm never calling her mom names, right? I'm never really, whatever. I may scream about something, right? But I'm never really attacking her character. I'm never really attacking her person. I'm always uplifting her person, right? And I want my children to always hear me do that, whomever I talk to, especially to their mother. The other thing I do, if anybody's listening here, right, is despite what the mom says, I'm always trying to turn it so that what she's doing is positive in their eyes, right? I don't want a situation where my kids are listening to me put down their mother or their mother's ideas, right? So, I may be more loose with what I'm trying to say, more vague in some regards, right? Because I want to say what she did was stupid. I would never say that, right? I'd be like, well, she comes from a different place, blah, 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 right? And they may say, come on, Dad, both this, that, and the other. And I'm like, we may agree to disagree, right? But I'm just very mindful that I want my children's takeaway to be like, I never heard Dad call Mom bad names, or I never heard Dad, right, speak down about this, right? And then as far as like leading, I'm just always recognizing that they're going to be using me as a litmus test. They're going to be using me as a benchmark, right? To when they look at relationships, right? And I'm very mindful of that now. I take it very seriously and just trying to put my best foot forward. I mean, I slip up, I had a couple of days, I punched a wall or something like that. And, they remind me that, hey, that wasn't what you're supposed to do. And, I'm like, it wasn't my best day. And I think that as we're learning on a journey too, right? One of the things that I've learned in the past, say 5-6 years, is that the best thing we can do is accept that we're fallible, accept that we're, works of in art, and we're in works too, right? So, we can get better. And as long as we can own shortcomings that we have, and you can accept there's areas that we can improve, I think that makes us even stronger men and makes us, greater men to the people who follow us.
Yeah. My wife once said to me, she said, be the father that your kids need, not the father that you want. Or, yeah, something like that, right? And just like you, it has served me well, because now I'm very conscious of what I do and what I say, because I know they're watching and listening. They may not be looking directly at me, but I know my little one for sure is listening. So is my oldest, and so it's very important.
And I will say one thing. With that being said, a lot of times we may not know they're listening, right? And then we are reminded that they heard us later down the road, right? And that's something big for me, because I find myself quoting my mom a lot, right? Like a lot, right? And my favorite commercial with that is, it's an insurance commercial that I'm sure everyone's seen. It's like, we're turning into our parents, right? But when you look, I think anyone who looks at those commercials, they see themselves in there, right? Because they're doing stuff their parents were doing that they thought they would never do. They're saying stuff their parents said that they thought they would never say, right? And it really gets you, right? Because it's also alerting you that times have changed, right? But then some things stay the same, right? So,
as a Black dad, what is your greatest superpower?
Knowing you can blend between all worlds. Words like rhythm, right? How you dress, what communities you can go into, kind of just float as you ask that question. Because, the world is not mostly white, right? And we think about how African-American culture has been exported globally, right? And we think about how that door doesn't always swing two ways for everyone. A perfect example of that is, my daughter just yesterday, I'm driving her to dance, and she says, oh, I'm preppy or something. And she seemed kind of negative about it. All right. And I'm like, why is that a problem? And she's like, well, Reagan, this her friend of hers that's white, right? She's like, well, Reagan dresses like this, but then when, you know, she dresses like with some flavor, like everyone's like, oh, she's the spicy white girl. She's all cool. I said, well, maybe it goes both the other way for you, right? And I'm like, black people dress preppy, you know? She's, yeah, but that means you're whitewashed. I'm like, well, I disagree with that, right? You know? Yeah, Tommy Hilfiger got rich off of black people. And he made a comment about it, right? You know, we like name brands. We like what we like, but you can be preppy in and of yourself, right? So the reality is that I challenge her to think of it this way. A black person can dress preppy, but the reason she's getting some street cred is because now the white girl wants to have a little flair and not be preppy. Everyone takes notice of that, right? A white person can't go into a black club, right? Necessarily and just blend in sometimes, right? Right? When you decide to put some Jordans on or a nice, you know, tracksuit and blah, 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 and walk around, no one's thinking like, oh my gosh, you look kind of crazy. But a white person did is like, oh, you trying to be black. Come on. Or whatever, right? But if you want to put a suit on, ain't nobody really questioning you why you have a suit on. Everybody wears a suit. Right? So it's things like that, right? Or, you know, type of music you listen to. You happen to be a Caucasian cat, you listen to hip hop and rap, everyone's got a problem with it, right? You know, they may or may not have as much of an issue if they hear you listening to classical or jazz, right? We started all of that. You know what I'm saying? So I think our superpower as a black dad is educating my children on how diverse they are, right? Educating my children on how amazing of a life they have. And then really giving them, based on my own experiences, the keys to where they can really flourish. Get your passport, travel, learn a second language, right? Have a strong vocabulary, right? Play a group sport, right? Not just hip hop dance, right? And so be global in your thinking, be global in where you've seen, right? And where you and travel. And so, you know, giving them that access, right, I think will be huge for them. And then, you know, the rest is, you know, you just got a little bit more flavor than everybody else.
What role does your own upbringing play in how you raise your own children?
Good and bad, you know. I'll start with the bad. I think not having a father figure in my life, you know, as a young man, I think there's a lot of shortcomings that I had in terms of knowing intrinsically how to deal with certain situations. I think there was a lot of back and forth in my own marriage, right? That, you know, had I had an example set in front of me, right, I may have been able to manage that a little bit better, right? You know, the whole happy wife, happy life thing, you know, I grew up in a school of too short, you know, man, I wasn't really accepting none of that, right? You know, I laid down rules like Sunday and Monday, you don't talk to me, it's football day, right? You know, twice a week, I'm golfing for 5 hours, don't call me. Like, what? You know, I was like, you know, I don't do diapers. What? You know? That caused a lot of consternation in my household, right? In the early years of my marriage. Because I just didn't know. Right? I didn't understand hair and makeup. I didn't understand it, right? Why does it take you an hour? Why? Right? You know, I had no room to give in there because I didn't understand it. So I think like that, you know, didn't make me a great husband, right? And, you know, I think also because we grew up lower middle class, you know, we didn't take lots of trips. We didn't do a lot, right? It was, you know, it was a lot of like, figure it out. You know, my OG was very much like, how you gonna pay for that? Right? And how you gonna pay for that? How's that gonna happen? Right? You know, when I got one of my driver's license, she was like, how you gonna pay for that? You know, and I was like, she's like, exactly, go get you a job, right? That, okay, I got that. We got that job. You know, I want to play football. How you gonna pay for that? You know, I was like, okay, so, you know, so my upbringing has played in a positive way some hard love, and I don't get that love from my kids. I get that love from my community around me, right? Their cousins' parents. It's like, man, Rob, kids don't know how lucky they are. I'm an econ poli-sci major, right? So my kids here, what's the opportunity cost? A lot. Like, oh, you only got $20? So what you not gonna get, right? Right? They're like, oh, okay, and other parents hear that conversation, we'll be in the store, my little ones. I'm like, here's your $5. Go ahead and make that transaction. Right? I don't want to talk to anybody. Well, I guess you must have want that candy, didn't do you? Hey, I'm there trying to figure out how to get the money in there. I'm like, what's your change? Make sure you count your change, dog. Somebody gonna try to take you for that change. If you don't count it, somebody else gonna count your money. You don't want anybody else counting your money, things like that, right? So, that part of how I grew up, you're getting all of that, right? And they're mindful of cost. They're mindful that, hey, again, some of it's our environment, right? I'm like, hey, yeah, you got a nice crib. Yeah, you live in a nice area. You see cops on the corners, making sure you're safe. Yeah, but guess what? You ain't getting 5 AirPods and iPods and the newest iPhone and Lululemon and all these other name brands. Like, that ain't about to happen, right? And so that part, I think, is playing a part as well to the good side. So I think in terms of the relationship part and how to manage them and manage my own emotions, that part's a work in progress, and I'm trying to get better every day. But in terms of them understanding how to not be spoiled and understanding the value of $1, I think they're going to turn out pretty well.
Yeah. It like you said, it's a delicate balance, but I feel like kids are smart enough. We don't give kids enough credit. They're smart enough to know, and they are really wise in figuring out what's going on, and breaking it down to manners that they can understand it, right?
Yes.
We just don't give them enough credit for that. How do you encourage open communication and emotional expression within your family?
I would say what I do a lot is I lawyer. It goes back to lawyering, right? I really encourage them to listen to what the other person is saying. 2 examples that come to mind. So my twins, boy and a girl, right? They fight all day, right? and just like you said, our children are watching us, right? Some of their behaviors or what they're responding to may be off another interaction between the other kids or whatever, right? And so the example I'm going to give you is my daughter does something that upsets my son, okay? Or vice versa. He does something to upset her. She does something to him, right? He hits her because, we're boys. We got that one move, right? May not have vocabulary, but, we're going to bust you in the mouth.
Right.
And then they'll cry, right? And so that's when I come in. I hear the crying, the screaming, or no, I didn't know, or someone runs to me. And then I'll say, hey, what happened? She did blah, 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 blah. Okay. And why did that happen? Right? Blah, blah, blah. I guess she said, okay, stop, right? Think about what you just said, right? Did what she do or did what she say, right, warrant you to hit her? Could you have done another option? Could you not have just, whatever? If you hit her on accident, why could you just say sorry? She was probably mad because you just didn't say sorry. Sorry, so sorry. I thought, oh, did you mean that? Don't you care about your sister, right? Things like that, right? So I will really challenge them to really listen. Or, they watch a lot of TikTok or YouTube, unfortunately, YouTube shorts, I'm constantly coming to turn YouTube off. And some of it is the language, right? there is no, you know, review of the stuff that gets posted, right? So, someone just says anything and they put it on there, right? The filters and the algorithms through Google don't really catch everything, right? So, a lot of times, they're arguing back and forth, they're cutting each other off, and and I'll come in, I'll say, slow down, right? Like, hey, that's not right. Let them finish their thought. Maybe you learn something if you actually listen to what they're trying to say. And then by my own mannerisms, I try to do the same thing, right? Sometimes they'll call me out, like, Dad, let me talk. I'm like, okay, check, right? Go ahead. And so from an emotional perspective, right, give them a chance to really verbally express their entire thought. Right? We know that's therapeutic as writers, as journalists, right? We know it's therapeutic to actually listen to what you have to say or even see what your thought is, write it out, right? So that's the lens that I'm looking at it through, by giving them the opportunity to actually fully express what they're feeling or fully express their position on something, right? They get to listen, we get to hear the thing, and then again, I go back to root cause management, right? You could say, okay, well, what's really a problem here? So, my wife doesn't really feel that way. Like, generally, she just wants to get to the end of it. She wants it to stop, right? Just shut up, get out, whatever. And she and I struggle in that space too, because that's who I'm trying to be as a person. It's what I do at work, right? And it's how I'm trying to manage and lead my family here, right? Because I think it's very critical to let someone express themselves, even at 9, right? To really understand what's driving their emotion and their issues, right? And sometimes, they stutter, I say, you know what? Take your time. Think about what you're trying to say so I can understand the whole sentence, because I can't really understand what the hell you're saying right now, right? But you give them the opportunity to really think through, and I think that that's a skill set that will serve them well going forward.
No, definitely. It's interesting because my oldest has helped teach me to raise my youngest son. My oldest son has helped me teach me to raise my youngest son. And so with my oldest son, he's more like me. So it's more of, I need to find out on my own type of thing. Glad you're telling me, but I still need to find out on my own. Whereas my youngest son, I can pretty much tell him with a stern voice, don't do that. And I can almost guarantee you it'll never happen. You know what I mean?
That's fantastic.
It's knowing their children and the way they act. And I feel like the more we can do that, right, the more we get a hold of our emotions. They used to be emotional about it, right? And it's like, you don't need to be emotional about things. Just like you said, talk them through,
Yeah.
What do you think what do you think we need to do as Black dads in order for people to see us?
That's an interesting question, Lionel, because we have society, we have statistics, we have data, right? We have the precedent that has been set about just how all dads have been kind of absent, right? From the beginning of time, right? Dads have not necessarily been the ones bringing up kids. So it's kind of a false narrative, right? That it's a Black dad thing versus a dad thing. I think the other asterisk is the incarceration rate, right? Where, you think about how pretty much the 80s and early 90s, right, before they privatized the prisons, right? You really had this. And since they privatized the prisons, you just see like this huge influctuation, right, or absence of Black men. And so, yes, many of us were the products of single family homes. And I think that kind of was set some of this precedent. And I say that to say, I prep that to say that I don't think, you know, I know a lot of black men who are doing great work, right? Um, Most of the guys in my circle are great dads, are greater dads than myself, right? I know a lot of men who don't have their own children who are great dads, right? Whether they are coaches or, teachers, right? Or, in some type of public office, right? And they put on people underneath them, right? Or pastors, right? So, to answer your question more directly, what can we do to be seen? I think it's continue what we're doing and encouraging other men to just understand the importance that you are being watched, right? Because I know I've made it a point that when I meet men like yourself and I see they had, they have children, I might even know a brother, but I see him walking on the wharf with his kids. I'm like, what's up, Dad? I see you, Dad. You know what I'm saying? What up, good dad? Because, as I tell everybody, I tell my team this at work too, like, you have a choice. We all have choice. God gave us choice, right? So you can either get up this morning and swing your feet out of bed and go into that place and do what you're supposed to do, or not. You can lay your ass in the bed right here.
Mm-hmm.
You want to wither away? You want to shun your responsibilities? No problem. You can do it. I'm sure there will be consequences, but you have the choice. So I celebrate the people who made the choice to do the right thing, right? And so when I see Black men who make the choice to take their kids out, to, anytime you got more than 2 kids, for sure, right? I'm just all like, what I'm saying, right on, Black dad, because or even a white dad, I'm saying dad, right? Because, it's not been in our DNA to take this. Society would tell you that more men are being active. And I don't know what's going on in this world. Everybody want to have babies at 19 and 20 again. It's really interesting. Even the dudes, right? I would say it's easier to be a good Black dad now, right? Because you can take your paternity leave and you're seeing a lot of other guys around you who are, either staying at home or they got the knapsack and don't feel bad about it, right? So I think we'll see more of it. But I think, to answer your question, what we can do to be seen more is be open to encouraging all our dads, Black or otherwise, that they're doing a good job and that people are watching you, right? And we just see you doing it. Just keep doing it. I think that's what we can do to be seen.
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, let's stay connected.